Okay, so hold on one second. Okay, so we're going to start talking about classes in Python. Before I start going into that, let me just point out this excellent document that you can find. Tells you all about classes in Python. This is going to be especially helpful if you've done some sort of object oriented programming before, like Java, C++, something like that, and have a basic idea of what a class is. This is very helpful. If you haven't, that's fine. This is also helpful. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to start talking about it in this week as well. Even if you haven't seen it before. Anyways. So as you can imagine, oftentimes when you're programming something, you will have objects that all do something very similar but are all different from each other. So if you think about complex numbers, what is a complex number? A complex number is this thing that has an imaginary part and a real part. We know what it means to add two complex numbers together. We know what it means to multiply one complex number by another. We know what the modulus of a complex number is. We know what the square root of a complex number is, what the logarithm of a complex number is, all of these things. And so it doesn't matter what the exact complex number is. There are general rules for multiplying any two complex numbers, or more specifically, let's say, for finding the modulus of a complex number. Doesn't matter what the complex number is, it's the same rule for every complex number. And so if I want to write a program that has a bunch of different complex numbers, I don't want to have to do this compute anytime I want to do a standard computation on a complex number. I don't want to have to literally write this code every single time I want to use it for a number of reasons. One, that gets repetitive. Two, there's again this idea of encapsulation and abstraction. If I have this sort of area of my program where I do all of my where I sort of have a function, let's say, that does these standard computations on complex numbers. When I want to think about doing the computations on complex numbers, I can focus my attention on, okay, so here's how we do the computation with a complex number in this part of the program, and then over here in this part of the program where I'm using those computations, I just assume everything is going to work well because I know I've worked very hard in this part of the program making sure that the complex number computation is correct. Okay, and of course, instead of complex number, there's all sorts of different things that we could be using here. A standard example would be something like cars or automobiles or vehicles. Vehicles have many different attributes: the number of wheels, the number of doors, how big it is, how many seats there are, all of these sort of things, but they all can do common things like drive and blow their horn and all of these different things, but they all do those in slightly different ways. So this is the idea that we're going to be working at here. I'm just going to start by teaching the basic syntax for what a class is, and try to work through with examples demonstrating what a class is. Okay, so I think the best way is to just show you the syntax for a class and then talk about it. So if you want to introduce a new class, I'm going to call it class complex numbers. Okay, this is going to be I'm going to sort of build this class from the ground up. At first, the fact that the class is called complex numbers doesn't really have anything to do with the fact that we're dealing with complex numbers. Some of you are probably shouting at the screen now. I just am talking and did not mean to put a parentheses there. So we're going to put a colon, and just like with all of Python, everything underneath the colon and that's indented is going to be part of the class definition. Okay, so I'm just going to say something very simple here. A is equal to 5. And I'm going to run this line of code. So now, in Python, in this Jupyter instance, there is a variable called complex number, and it's a class. And if I want to access this number, a is equal to 5, I can just do complex numbers dot a. So anything that comes after a period, I'm going to call an attribute. So a is an attribute of this class. It's called a class attribute. And if I run this, let me actually write print here so we can get something consistent. When I run this, it's just going to print the number 5. I can also change this complex numbers.a is equal to 19. And if I print complex numbers.a is now going to print 19. So I can change this as well. If you're kind of familiar with object-oriented programming, this is kind of like I've mentioned it before. It's a class attribute. Later on, I'll explain what this means. If you create an instance of this class, you can also have access to this as well. Okay. But it's going to be the same for every instance of the class. Again, if you don't know what an instance of a class is, wait until we get to that. But if you do, I'm just letting you know. Okay, another thing that we can do, I can say complex numbers.b is equal to 5. Okay, and now I've sort of added an attribute to the class called b. And then if I do print complex numbers.b, it's going to print the number 5. And I can delete complex numbers.b. This is not something we're going to do a lot, but I can delete this from the program memory. And now if I try to access this, I should get an error. It's trying to find it. That's what it was doing there. And it has no attribute b. Similarly, I can do like this. Whoops. I made a mistake here. Okay, so similarly, I can try to do this. Whoops. Sorry, I deleted it. I paused it and deleted it and then didn't add it. So now we're going to get a similar error message. Okay, so the idea is that you can delete class attributes as well. So let me delete a lot of this stuff. Now, typically, one of the main type of class attributes that we're going to have is going to be a function. Okay, so I'm going to write, and again, if you're familiar with Python programming, I'm going to write something maybe in a way that you're not expecting, but it's because I'm trying to build to something. So I'm going to write a function here, def, I'm just going to call it a function, my function. My function is not going to take any parameters, and it's going to print hello world, like this. Okay, so now I can do complex numbers dot my function. Okay, and when I run this function, okay, again, what this is doing in Python is saying complex numbers. Okay, I know what complex numbers is. It's this variable, it's a class. I'm going to look at its class definition. There's this thing called there's this function called my function. Okay, good. So it has this my function. He is calling this, so I'm just going to do whatever this function says. So if I run it, it's just going to print hello world. Something else that we can do here, I can say f is equal to complex numbers dot my function. And so now if I run this, it's setting f equal to this function here. And so now if I just run f, it's going to do the same thing, because f is now pointing to this function. So that's something that is something that is very useful, and we'll be using that on the project, or similar ideas in the project. Okay, but like any function, this can take an argument. So I'm going to give it the argument x, and I'm going to say hello world, you passed blank as an argument. And then I'm going to do dot format x. Okay, so I'm going to run this, and if I do complex numbers dot my function, I'm going to pass in the number 10. And now what's going to happen is, if I've done everything correctly, it should say, hello world, you passed 10 as an argument. Of course, there's always the possibility that I've messed something up. Okay, hello world, you passed 10 as an argument. Okay, and we have all sorts of different functions as well. This is just one example of a function. You can have different functions as well. Okay, now this type of use of complex numbers is, we've seen this before. So for example, when we did something like math.something, this is more closely related, though I guess not exactly, to what we're doing here. We have this thing called a class, and this class has these different functions and attributes, and using this dot, we can access those. Attributes and functions. So for example, if I just do my function 10, Python doesn't know what my function is. It doesn't know what my fun is, because it's only hidden in this namespace called complex numbers. It's only within this namespace. So if I want to access my fun, I have to first tell Python to go into the class numbers or complex numbers, and then within that there is an attribute called my function. It's going to go to my function and say, okay, this is a function. What is he doing? Well, he's passing in the 10. So let me now do the body of this function with 10 as a parameter. Notice if I try to do something like a within this class here, within the class definition here, a right now is just the number 5. And an integer is not callable. So when I run this, I'm going to get some sort of error message that says this is not callable. So if I run this, int object is not callable. On the other hand, I could do something weird like this. Now this is not something that I would imagine we would want to do. I could say complex numbers.a is equal to complex numbers.f. My fun. Now within the complex numbers class, there's an attribute called myFun, and it's setting complex numbers.a to this complex numbers.myFun. So when I run this, now complex numbers.a no longer refers to 5, it refers to this function. And now if I run this code, since now complex numbers.a is set equal to this will work exactly, this will work, quote unquote, correctly. It will print this, hello world, you passed 10 as an argument. Okay, again, these are weird things that are not things that you would typically do when programming, I guess. Though I'm not an expert, I could be completely wrong about that. But this just shows different things that you can do with complex with classes. Okay, now in the next video, I'm going to show you, I'm going to start talking about looking at instances of particular classes and what that means and different things we can do along those lines, which is really one of the big uses of classes. Right now, the way that I've used it now, this would be kind of like what would be called a static class in other languages. If you're used to that, static class meaning something where you never really have instances of the classes, you just refer to only the classes itself. But again, I don't want to talk so much about that right now. Just mentioning that if you've seen those things before, this is how I sort of think about how this class would be relative to other programming languages. Okay, sorry, that's it for this video.